We have an amazing story to tell, and we have a long way to go. To get us started this morning, I wanted to ask everyone in the room who is paid or staff or professionally involved in this issue of the prostitution of children or the international trafficking of women and children to please stand. If you have any professional association with this issue. So you get to see the incredible numbers of people and your allies in this, the number of wonderful men who are standing by our side to get this figured out and dealt with. And now can I ask, if you'd stay standing, if I can ask those of you who are volunteering in any capacity, because many of you I know have stood up and wanted to know what you can do to end this horror in our community. Thank you so much for all of you for what you're doing. Any of you could have been on this panel this morning. Thank you so much for coming. Again, I'm Stephanie Davis, the policy advisor on women's issues to the mayor, and I help staff the Atlanta Women's Agenda, several of whom are here this morning, along with wonderful, wonderful volunteers from the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton, for whom I could not do this without, and many thanks to the Atlanta Women's Foundation. I'd now like to introduce the mayor of the city of Atlanta, who has courageously taken a stand and been heard all over the country on this issue, Mayor Shirley Franklin.
Working from here. Good morning. How are you? Thanks for coming out so early. It's a good thing. Forgive my cold. I think I can get through this. But I certainly want to thank Stephanie and the team that has been working with her on a wide array of issues related to women and children and girls. So can we give a round of applause to Stephanie Davis? I say this each time, but you know Stephanie. Those of you who know her and are getting to know her well, she marched into the office and there was no marching her out. And she was absolutely right. So we're pleased that she's brought this forum, this concept to our attention, and it's proven to be a successful way to address a number of issues and to bring people together across diverse backgrounds but similar concerns. And this certainly is one of those. I want to also thank the panelists who are here with us today. Each one of you will have a chance to speak to the issue in a few minutes. I have a few notes, and I'm going to go through them. 2 years ago, the study produced by the Atlanta Women's Agenda was released, which brought the issue of human trafficking and the commercial exploitation of children in Atlanta into full view and full discussion. 8 months ago, we launched the Dear John campaign, a public education campaign to raise awareness in our search for solutions. What we know about the exploitation of any individual is that it often begins with an economic need, a need to survive, whether a young woman is living in a village in some far land or is brought to the United States on false pretenses or has run away from abusive situation here in Atlanta and needs to survive on the streets. We know that it is a form of violence and abuse, and we in this city have declared that we're going to do something about it. There are 3 areas where solutions, where we believe that there are solutions. We should criminalize the right people, the exploiters, those who take advantage of the vulnerability of children who are unprotected. We have set up an child exploitation unit, an anti-trafficking unit, and have enhanced the ability of the Vice Squad, all within the Atlanta Police Department, to investigate and make arrests where necessary. We are working closely with the DA's office and other law enforcement agencies and judicial agencies, and we are looking at new legislation that will make the pimping and pandering of minors more difficult. 2, we've got to do something about prevention. Prevention involves understanding what makes a girl or boy vulnerable to being exploited and understanding the role that poverty plays. We have begun to explore the feasibility of a John School and a John's Court when an adult is involved, because if we can diminish all prostitution, the likelihood of children being exploited will diminish too. The Dear John campaign has reached many people through the goodwill of several publications and broadcast media in Atlanta. It has received an Emmy Award for outstanding public service, and it will now be seen in the Atlanta Constitution and the Atlanta Business Chronicle through a generous grant. Last week, after a considerable amount of research by Stephanie and others, I sent a letter to Craigslist asking them to take responsibility for the fact that it is a marketplace for child prostitution. Now, some of us know Craigslist for furniture, but indeed, children are being marketed through Craigslist. Services to victims. We are strongly support the appropriation of DHR to fund more treatment and assessment beds for young victims who deserve another chance at childhood, and are pleased to learn of over $400,000 in new funds that will be available in the coming months. Congratulations. We are very grateful to each of you who lobbied on behalf of these programs. We are working with faith-based groups and others who want to volunteer and step up and create safe exits for young girls and boys who deserve another chance to turn their lives around and break free from the exploitation. This morning, we are announcing a new restricted fund at the Atlanta Police Foundation, the fund to end child prostitution. We will raise private dollars to help the police department purchase the technology we need to crack down on internet-based predators as well as street prostitution. There is no question in just 24 months we have come quite a ways, and many of the recommendations of the study have been addressed, but we still have a long way to go before we can declare Atlanta a no-tolerance zone for the commercial sexual exploitation of children. I want to end on a story. I have a older relative who, she would be very proud that she's 90, that called me this weekend to say that she had the telephone number of a woman who had come to her church. And the woman was complaining that her daughter would disappear for 2 and 3 weeks at a time. And the story, as told third or fourth hand, mind you, was that the mother was distraught and could not find any help. So let's put a pin in that. That's possible, right? Don't know where to go to the wrong place, and therefore you don't get help. But she also went on to say that her daughter would come back after 3 weeks and have a pocket full of money, and that this 14-year-old had a boyfriend who was 43 years old. I want you to put a pin in that. Which story do you believe? The second. So as I was talking to this older relative, I said, now if you give me this telephone number and name, I'm from the old school. I believe number 2. I believe that the family is taking advantage of the money that comes back in and putting their heads in the sand. Now, some would say I'm just, I don't want to see the bright side. I have to wear bright colors to keep myself, from being morbid or something. But the fact of the matter is, here's a church community who's caring, who still doesn't know what to do, doesn't know who to call, doesn't know how to assist, and to some extent is naive enough to think that this 14-year-old who's gone for 2 and 3 weeks at a time, never listed as a runaway, is off doing bad things on her own. There's at least one adult who we know is the problem, and I would suggest there might be another. So, there is no question in my mind that we are just beginning this campaign. Just beginning this campaign. Because we are finding ourselves in a place where people of goodwill are still completely in the dark about what they can do to protect a 14-year-old girl who lives in the city of Atlanta. This is a campaign. There's a lot of things we could do in the world. I mean, if you open the newspaper, it's almost like there's no good news anymore. There's a lot of things we could do. There's no question there's violence across the world. There's hunger. Families are being stretched to their limit by the rising cost of living, the depression of wages, layoffs because of the changes in the economy. But I don't think there's anything more important for us as a city for taking ownership of our children. From birth till they get grown. And you notice I didn't say until they are adults. Till they get grown. Till the world believes, we don't have to tell them, well, she's 21 or he's 24. Until it's obvious by the way they carry themselves, the way they're educated, the way they're able to contribute to the community. I mean, the laws are fine at 18 and 21, but America has lots of 20 and 21 and 22-year-olds who still need parental guidance, who still need the intervention of our community in order to make this a good place for them to live. So I want to thank you for coming today. This is a very, very important issue to Atlanta. The only other story I would tell is that Atlanta, through your work, through Stephanie's work, for the Atlanta Women's Foundation's work, actually discovered this problem before Anderson Cooper. Thank you.
And we would all be nothing if we did not have a mayor like Shirley Franklin, who was willing to give us not only this platform, but stand so strongly against this with us in this issue. It's made all the difference. We don't know if Atlanta has any worse problem than any other major city in the United States. We're going to hopefully find out over the next few months as we start to take a census of who, in fact, is on the streets and on the other side of that internet address. But we do know that we have an opportunity here at this moment in history when there are so many good people who are willing to follow the leadership of a mayor who has the strength and the courage to make this a priority. So there are many friends here, as I've told you, the FBI, the GBI. We're so happy to see that Paul Howard has joined us now, too. And we could have heard from many different people because there are many different solutions and many, many stories that are in this room today. On the other side of your agenda, you will see that in the face of this daunting problem, there is, in fact, something you can do. So I want to invite you to plug in where you can, to find that space in your life and in history where you cannot ignore this anymore, and you will take action to join the many of us who are on the front lines. This morning we have not a researcher, not a funder, not a faith-based leader, not a volunteer and the many concerned citizens, but people who can tell their story. I mean, we could really go on all day with the many stories there are to tell. You're going to hear this morning from a mother, a major service provider, a police officer who is dealing with this from the demand side, and the prosecution. So first I want to introduce you to Nikita Hurt. Nikita is a new friend. She's the mother of a daughter who has survived the streets and who has started a support group for moms called Saving Our Daughters. Nikita doesn't come up and present herself as the stereotypical mom who doesn't care, who allowed her daughter to be abused, who then ran to the streets. This middle-class mom, it happened to her, and she's here to tell her story this morning. I'm so glad you're with us.
Good morning. My name is Nikita Hurt. I am a former juvenile probation specialist with the Department of Juvenile Justice. During my tenure as a probation officer, I supervised hundreds of juvenile offenders. A large percent of my probation caseload consisted of young women, young girls that were runaways, that were involved in teenage prostitution. I'd like to ask each parent, I'm a little bit nervous, close your eyes. Imagine your 11-year-old daughter having sex with your 40-year-old coworker. Imagine popping in a CD, sitting down in front of your television, and what you view on the screen is a 15-year-old being forced to have sex with a dog. Or receiving a phone call stating, we've located the bodies of 3 teenage girls. One may be your missing daughter. We'd like for you to come and identify the body. Before you stands the mother of a teenage prostitute. In 1998, my 14-year-old daughter walked out of our home, went to the mailbox, and for 7 years, the streets was a place she called home. I asked myself, how could this be? This could not be happening to my family. Things like this don't happen to families like mine. I came from an educated family. We were members of a mega church. My children wore designer clothing. They took ballet lessons. They played the violin. We went on family vacations. Things like this don't happen to people like me. The police took no interest in me helping to locate my daughter. A private investigator was hired. My daughter was right here on the streets of Atlanta. People saw her, but I didn't. The police, they didn't help. There was no help. If I could tell you how many missing persons and runaway reports that were filed with the DeKalb County Police Department, I was told, young girls, they run away all the time. It's no big deal. File the report, go home. I did that with a lot of unrest. And every time I got a lead, I would call the police. I became so angry and so frustrated with the police department, with everybody, not just the police, but with everybody. I couldn't get any help anywhere. People viewed me as a bad parent and wanted to know, well, what did you do to make your daughter run away? I was a good mom. I believed you spare the rod, you spoil the child. I had good kids, so I did not understand. I later found out that my daughter met whomever these people were on a chat line over the telephone. Internet wasn't as popular back in 1998 as it is now. The Department of Juvenile Justice, she was committed, finally, for status offenses. That didn't help. She was committed, but they don't detain children who are committed for runaway. So she just sat in the system. There were no programs available. There was no money. There was nothing. All I got was excuses, nothing. My daughter, before her 17th birthday, would be arrested in Nevada for prostitution, for auto theft. She would come home from time to time, beat up, dirty, hungry, always high on some kind of drugs. She'd be there for a day or so, and then the phone calls would start, the threatening phone calls. They knew where we lived. Not only did they threaten my daughter, they threatened my life, her sister's lives, her grandparents' life, everybody. So she'd leave and go back to the streets. She's contracted several different STDs. Her pimp, who now has full-blown AIDS, I'm not sure where he is right now. I often wonder, what's next for my daughter? Before her 17th birthday, she would have had a child. danced as a stripper, not just here in Georgia, but Alabama, Florida, California, wherever the pimp would take her. She'll be 23 on Saturday. She's uneducated, so I'll never get to see her walk across the stage and turn her tassel at her high school graduation. She'll never make it to the prom. She never made it to her ballet recital. My daughter has no hope, no self-esteem, and no will to live.
What have you done? Nikita, talk about your group, Saving Our Lives.
After I left the Department of Juvenile Justice, I started a support group for parents who were in a similar situation as I was. Because, honestly, you're stereotyped, and people say, well, this doesn't happen to people who have jobs or middle-class moms or parents. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. My support group, we meet once a month, and basically it's a group of mothers who have been through similar situations as myself. We meet, we talk, and we try to figure out ways to assist the police, assist the Juvenile Justice Department in finding programs that are suitable for our children.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Nikita, for putting a face on this crime and speaking from your heart and telling your story. And Kathy McCullough, who will be coming up next, is the community coordinator for the Juvenile Justice Fund, the premier organization in this community that has oversight for Angela's House, as you know, one of only 3 therapeutic treatment shelters in the United States. So we're lucky to have that resource. And Kathy is going to tell us about how we're about to expand those resources. Kathy is over CEASE, the organization that provides a wonderful volunteer opportunity for people who want to actually assist victims in court, help mentor them, and is going to tell us about a wonderful new study that is getting started and has been an incredible ally in coordinating all of our activities. Kathy?
Hi. You know, it's hard to come after Sansa. Putting the face on it is so different. I think all of us that have worked in the field know the people that are there. And I think sometimes as a society we try to find who's to blame. Initially, I think we blamed the girls, and then we did a good job of educating the community that these were not the ones that were at fault, that they were in fact victims. Then as a society we've tried to find the next level to blame. And then we turn to the parents. And I think at some level it's our own way of protecting that this isn't going to happen to us. But I think all of us, everybody in this room, everybody in the city of Atlanta, we are all to blame, like Mayor Franklin talked about. You know, to whatever extent we turn around and turn away because it's such an unpleasant topic and we don't want it to be in our city. In fact, when I started with the Juvenile Justice Fund about a year ago, there was a lot of media coverage around this, and they wanted to always talk to one of our girls at Angela's house. And I finally got to the point when NBC or CBS and 60 Minutes called, I said, you know, unless you're willing to talk about all we've done here in the city of Atlanta, I am unwilling. And I thought if I were sitting, which I thankfully will never be in Mayor Franklin's shoes, I thought, you know, I wouldn't want my city to be known as the hotbed of child prostitution in the country. I would want it to be known as the city that is doing the most of all of the cities. And I can tell you from having talked with different people, we are doing the most and we have done the most. And yet we still have a long way to go also. Stephanie mentioned CEASE and Angela's House, and the Juvenile Justice Fund does monitor those programs. Angela's House is managed by Inner Harbor and overseen by the Juvenile Justice Fund. And CEASE is our stands for Center to End Adolescent Sexual Exploitation, and we case manage the girls at Angela's house, work with the juvenile court, and so on. So we are really down in the trenches. I have been managing a grant that we at the Juvenile Justice Fund received because of all the grassroots efforts that happened in this city. The federal government recognized that we had something good going on, and they supported it, and we've been able to grow that over the last 3 years. So within the last 2 years, since that's what the focus of this particular meeting is about, we have launched a database that was funded by this grant called Cactus, which is the Child Abuse Case Tracking Information System, and that's part of the larger child abuse, because really commercial sexual exploitation is a niche of child abuse. But what this allows us to do, I think of it as connecting all the silos of services, the police, the hospitals, the schools, the juvenile courts, can now talk to each other through this database and make sure that before they might have been truant and run away from school, they might have been being picked up by the police for some minor crimes, but because there wasn't any way to communicate, they sort of had to escalate until they got into serious difficulty. Hopefully now with the every other week meetings that happen, where there's a multidisciplinary team that comes together, we'll be able to put a safety net around some of these children. About 2 months ago, I got the final signature on a protocol for managing at all the different agencies in Fulton County how to actually deal with if they came across, how to recognize and what they were going to do. This is one of few in the country. I've already sent copies of it out to different places because no one has an interdisciplinary approach to how to deal from DFACS to law enforcement to the schools and so on. In April, I don't remember the exact date, probably Stephanie, there was a faith-based summit here in Atlanta that evolved into a prayer vigil where we were out on the streets in probably the biggest downpour, which we would probably welcome right now, at midnight, walking the streets of the area in Atlanta where these girls, so there's a lot going on within the faith-based community. We also, just through this past legislature's session, were able to get $140,000 for a regional assessment center. That was unheard of because we were kind of a Johnny-come-lately onto the legislative agenda, so the fact that we got anything we were very grateful for, and there were a lot of those of you in the audience that helped us get that because you came down to the Capitol and helped us advocate for it. So this isn't something that just Stephanie does or just the law enforcement does or just the DA's office or just the Juvenile Justice Fund. This is something that we have to work together to do. Also passed in the legislature was a trafficking law this past session that went into effect on July 1st that gives the police more ability to deal with the perpetrators of this crime. So those have all happened and within this last 2 years. Where we are right now is also very exciting because there are a lot of wonderful things that are coming on a number of different ends. There's a woman by the name of Lisa Williams who is working on a house that she would like to she's raising it from the ground up and then providing treatment that will be like another Angela's house that will house 15 beds. And she recently has been working with the Faith-Based Coalition to get some help there. We've been working with Mr. Paul Howard and DHR to get a continuum of care service here for not just Fulton County, but a more regional assessment care. And then the Juvenile Justice Fund has also received a major funding grant from a private funder that's going to allow us to do a number of different things. The thing that we're most excited about, one of the first questions we always get is, what is the scope of this problem in Atlanta? And we've never really been able to have numbers that we could kind of say this is how we got them and so we're sure that they're correct. The only thing that I could say is, well, I know there were 100 girls that came through CEASE in 06, and that's just the top. That's just the people that actually show up in the juvenile justice system, and those are not anywhere near the number that are out on the streets. So part of what this grant is going to do is it's funding a private research grant to give us a defensible number as to what the scope. And then the other exciting thing about it for me is that they're going to come up with they will tie that number that they have to a formula with police arrests, or I'm not the research person, but there's going to be a way that we in the future can reliably see what kind of impact we're making on this population. So it will be really be a groundbreaking study. We have a government relations piece with this grant that's going to help us work and get more legislation passed that will be helpful. And we're also going to try and build on the community coalition of which the faith-based is a part, but we want to bring businesses into that. We feel that this is not just any one segment of the population's problem. My own particular feeling is that if we don't do this, we are really going to be behind the curve, because the Internet is going to explode this problem faster if we don't begin to get a safety net that we can tap into quickly. So the groundwork is there. I really do believe that, I was telling Stephanie, I have this image in my mind that there is still a mountain to climb as far as this is concerned. But where I used to live was in a rural part of upstate New York, and I rode my bike a lot, and we lived on a lake, and I would ride my bike around the lake, and you always choose your route based on which is going to have the most downhills and the fewest uphills. And so there was this one way that had the fewest uphills, but it left me with this huge hill at the end. And it was interesting because I found if I looked at the top of the hill when I was riding my bike, I was always pushing it by the time I got there. But if I just watched my front wheel go around, I would still be on my bike at the top. And so I suggest that that's what we need to do now. If we look at the top of the hill, it becomes discouraging. We need to be aware that that's there. But we just need to keep watching our front tire. And whatever is your next step or our next step, we need to keep taking it so that when we get to the top, we're all going to be on our bikes, and those girls and the boys will be protected from this particular problem in our city. There's hope, and there's still a problem. Thank you.
So now you've seen the face of the problem, or one face of it. You've heard the coordination that's going on and many of the services that are available and the ones that are emerging. It's now time for us to look at the demand side. People ask me all the time, do you think you can actually stop prostitution in Atlanta? Because we know that sex workers who start usually are between the ages of 11 and 13 when they enter. And so if you can end all prostitution, you can certainly end child prostitution. Is that a realistic goal? We know it has so much to do with poverty, and that if it wasn't about the fact that people need to survive, that they would never, ever go near this. So how do you get men to stop buying sex? How do you get the police to enforce all of the other crimes that are taking place that this is also related to? Well, we have someone to help us. Investigator Kalita Thurman, please come up, Kalita, has a very unenviable job of being an investigator for the Vice Squad. Kalita used to provide security for the mayor, and I think this may be a little bit more exciting. What do you think? But I also know that her boyfriend does not like the fact that she's doing what she's doing, but I'm thrilled that she is. Kalita, tell us about it.
Good morning. As Stephanie said, I work for the Vice Unit. There are two different units of the Atlanta Police Department that work with this horrific crime. We have Vice and we have the Child Exploitation Unit. The Child Exploitation Unit is a long-term investigation unit. They can actually concentrate on the girls, the origin, if there is a pimp, and then they work with like the Fulton County Advocacy Center, and they make sure the girls can get help. What we do is we go out daily and we do details. And what we do is we have decoy officers that go out and either they solicit the underage females or we try to go online. We have some challenges with that. So what we can do is we go online and we go to like Craigslist and Arrows and we get hotels to help us out and give us rooms. And we call girls over to the room and we make arrests. That's basically what we do. Vice is basically, we're supposed to handle gambling, liquor, and prostitution. That's our job. And people ask all the time, why is it that y'all arrests are so much smaller than they were back in the day? Well, when 2 prostitutes got shot in the city of Atlanta, we had to change our practices. So now there's monitoring devices. And so you can't send out 4 girls at one time, and you can't send out all these guys at one time. So that's why the numbers are not as large as they used to be. But it's safer for the officers and for the prostitutes, because the prostitutes were also saying that they were being sexually assaulted by our investigators. So now we can hear what's going on. We know what's going on. And so that's that. And there's a couple of myths that are going on. There is no magic corner that you can go to and pick up juvenile prostitutes. I mean, I know that's what the study is saying, but I've been out there. I've seen it. And the prostitution game has changed considerably. It is no longer you can go on a corner. 85% of prostitution happens online and on the internet. The other 15% are crackheads out there on the corner just turning a trick to get a hit. And the Vice Unit only has 7 investigators assigned to the unit. And according to SOP, we have to have 7 people to do a detail. So if someone goes to training, if someone is out sick, someone's on vacation, we're technically not allowed to do a detail. But we have gotten creative around that rule. So what we do is we do escort details. We go to a hotel. There's challenges because now the escort services, they are smart enough to know that the only internet access we have has a direct AP address to the City of Atlanta Police Department. So that creates a bit of a challenge. So we're proposing now to try to get some kind of laptops with air cards because they know that we're coming. And most of the websites require a credit card. We don't have credit card. We have access to cash. You know, access to cash, you can write and get a receipt, but they know that we don't have credit cards, so therefore we can't get to a lot of them without credit card access. But we can go to Craigslist and Arrows, and girls, of course, they lie on Craigslist has this excuse that they didn't know that they were juveniles, because they do post on the websites that they're 25 or 24, and when you get to the room, you can clearly see that they are not 25 or 24. Scenarios with the pimps and the young girls. A lot of young girls are introduced into it by their friends. Pimps today are not your everyday average. They're not walking around in flashy clothes and bright orange colors. They look just like you and me. And believe it or not, there are more females out there now than some of the males. I have case scenarios that show that women that live in the same neighborhood with the female. Let's say I'm 16 and my neighbor is 25 and she's cool and she's always got nice clothes, and she says, hey, you want to come hang out with me? And they take them downtown or to Buckhead or to Metropolitan, and they say, hey, this is how you can make some quick money. Their parents think they're just hanging out with their neighbor. They don't know. Case scenario, 16-year-old female out with her 25-year-old neighbor, solicits an undercover officer, and they tell him that we'll have sex with you for $100 each. And for an additional $100, we'll have sex with each other. Mom has no clue where her daughter is. Second scenario, they pick on young females that mentally challenged. We had a mentally challenged female who was 14, 15. She had a child, met a guy at a bus stop, and he says, hey, you know, you're a cute girl. I want to be your boyfriend. I'll help you take care of your child. And so she meets with him, and he tells her how she can make some money. And she's thinking he's going to take care of my child. He takes her to Fulton Industrial. He takes all of her personal belongings, her car keys, her EBT card, which is her food stamps and stuff to serves to take care of her child, her wallet, and everything. And he takes her on a corner of Fulton Industrial, gives her clothes, gives her shoes, and tells her to charge a set amount for set things. Leaves her out there with nothing but condoms and enough change to call him when she's done turning each trick. She's supposed to turn 10 tricks a night. And every time she's done, she's to call him. He comes over, takes the money from her, and gives her some more change and some more condoms. And when she tries to get out of it, because she finally got robbed or something on Fulton Industrial, and she tried to get out of it, he threatened her. He changed her mailing address, so now he's getting all of her public assistance coming to his house. He has keys to her parents' house, so they're afraid. And so once the police get involved and we try to work on the case, he threatens to burn down the mother's house. He actually went to the woman's house and doused the house with gasoline, but never struck the match. Eventually, the mother just got afraid and she moved away. That case is closed. We also have a human trafficking unit. Of course, you all know that women are being trafficked here for other countries to be prostituted. Case scenario, In Buckhead, in a highly Hispanic populated neighborhood, there are at least 30 to 40 girls from Cuba, different parts of Mexico that were here working the neighborhood. A female woman had rented at least 4 apartments in the complex. And every night the girls were given playing cards. So if they get picked up by the police, you don't know anything because all they have is a deck of playing cards. Well, guess what? Each one of the cards represents an act and a price of sex. And they go around the neighborhood, go into each apartment, performing these sexual acts. And they have to split half with the house. At the end of the week, they go turn in their deck of cards and they get paid. And the only reason we found this out was because the pimp got caught in a drug bust and was with one of the girls, and INS came in and she pretty much gave up the story. So INS took care of that case. We have some challenges with the police department because, of course, we only have a set amount of people to work on it. And like I said, we can't do long-term investigations because we do details daily. So mainly, we let the Child Exploitation Unit, they handle the investigation side, we handle the arrest side. Challenges with court. We only have a 10 o'clock and 8 a.m. city court now. And so if I come to work at 10 o'clock to go to court, my hours are up at 6 o'clock. So guess what? The unit is short because we don't have enough people to run a detail. And we also have some issues with some of the escort services getting very crafty, and now they are requiring for you to have picture ID. I love the officers I work with because they put their lives on the line, and they will show their own personal state identification to make the case. That's not a safe scenario, and you all know that. We're trying now to work to get fake state identification and different funds with hotels. We use certain hotels, but we also come into if I scratch your back, you're going to want me to scratch yours, right? It's a quid pro quo type of thing, something for something. They want us to deal with the prostitutes at their bars and stuff if they let us use a room, which is fine. But on the other hand, we're not allowed to lock up their patrons who are trying to pick us up if we're doing decoys. So we need some funds to actually do in what I call a hotel detail that's not framed around their own issues and their own interest. Are there any questions? Yes? Right now, they get locked up and they pay a fine and they get out of jail. But Stephanie, on the other hand, now is trying to propose something that's called a John School. And if you get locked up, you're going to pay a heavy fine that's also going to go toward the city of Atlanta to help the children in different advocacy groups. And you'll have to go through a school that will more than likely have someone like Miss Nikita Hurt. I would propose a child that's been through the same thing, especially if they're, because we do both. We do adult prostitution and children prostitution. So I think we should have at least an example from the children, the actual prostitutes, and maybe some kind of STD training and I don't know, whatever else, some kind of help for them also, because it's a sickness. You got to be sick if you're out trying to buy sex from a child. That's my own personal opinion.
Great. Thank you, Kalita. Thank you. Well, you heard some more reality just now, and I also wanted to clarify that the John School that we're proposing for the municipal court will be for adult men who transgress against another adult. We want the children who are being victimized to be handled a little differently by the court. So you've now heard from the victim side. You've now just heard from the law enforcement side. So we're starting to get a picture of how do you decrease demand so that it will dry up the supply, and how do you prosecute these men who are guilty of these crimes. And we have with us a very, very good friend, Paul Howard, who certainly took up the call from the mayor, the Dear John call, to say no more, not in the city. Paul, thank you for being with us this morning.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Mayor Franklin and Stephanie Davis for putting this effort together. Also to thank them for keeping the focus on what I think is one of the most horrendous problems facing our community today. I was running a little late this morning because I dropped my children off at school, and I have a 10-year-old daughter. And when I heard Mrs. Hurt speak this morning, And I believe what she wants you to understand, that this is not something that is immune to any segment of our community, but it is something that touches everyone. This is a real problem in the criminal justice system for many years. And I've served as a prosecutor since 1976, but I remember that when I started as a prosecutor, pimps who exploited children and johns were simply slapped on the wrist, given a small fine, and released. But we have found out that that doesn't work, and the criminal justice system has made an adjustment. And so now the pimps are being prosecuted, and they are actually being provided with felony sentences. And I asked my staff to just put together some statistics since for the last 4 years. And in the Fulton County Superior Court, we have prosecuted 24 pimps. We've got 10 pending cases. With respect to johns, we have over the last 4 years prosecuted 14 cases, and there are 11 of them pending right now. I want to tell you, though, about one of the cases that involved a john, so you can understand what is going on. And I believe why the mayor has said to us that we must do something to show johns that they should not come to our community. I'm going to use the name of this victim, and the reason that I'm using the name of the victim, Stephanie had a chance to talk with her. She was only 15 years old, but she wanted people to know her story. She gave the news media the opportunity to talk with her. Her name was Samantha Walker, and she was from Toledo, Ohio. Well, an Atlanta pimp went to Toledo and brought her back to Atlanta. And this is one of the things that we find. What the pimps do is that they take the little girls to different communities so that they would be disconnected from families and they won't know their way around. So he brought her to Atlanta, and what he told this little girl is that she had to earn $850 per day. And so she went out every night, and I mean she went out every night to earn $850. And on this particular occasion, she was out at about 3 o'clock in the morning because she had not yet earned her $850. She was picked up by John. Once he picked her up, he forced her to commit several sexual acts. He ended up taking her to a motel in Cobb County. He continued to abuse her. She finally got enough courage to call the police. And because she was from Toledo, she could barely describe the location. She remembered seeing some sign on the expressway, and so that is how we were able to figure out that it took place in our community. We tried that case in Fulton County, and the John was convicted. In fact, Stephanie showed up and asked the judge at the sentencing hearing to give this John what we thought was an appropriate sentence. Well, the judge sentenced him to 10 to serve 5 years in prison. And we also have to give some thanks to our Superior Court judges, because in Fulton County, the average sentence for a pimp or panderer is now 9.5 years. So they're no longer just getting that slap on the wrist. They are going to prison. But let me tell you what happened to Samantha after her case was completed. She said to our staff that she wanted to change her life. She wanted to go to a place where she could learn, she could receive some counseling, and to make this difficult transition. And this is what Ms. Hurt talked about. It's a very difficult transition once you've been in this life now to become normal again. Well, when Samantha made that request, sadly, we did not have a place to take her. Kathy McCullough mentioned Angela's house. That facility only has 6 beds. There's a waiting list. The waiting list is about 15 people, but in actuality, the waiting list is really about 115. And what we found out is that the people in the court system and the law enforcement officials, we and the prosecutors, we simply don't put children's name on the list because we realize that there's no place to put them. So Samantha asked could I be placed in this institution? We didn't have a place for her. And so she returned to Toledo. And we were in touch with her. In fact, my office communicated with her about 3 times a week. And Toledo's situation was very much like our situation. They didn't even have Angela's house with the 6 places. This little girl had no place to go. So I want to tell you that sadly, in July of this year, she committed suicide. And her story, I believe, is very much like many children in our community. She died a sudden death, but many of our little girls are dying intermittently because they don't have a place to go. There's not an institution that they are allowed to attend that can help in this conversion. I want to point out some of the things that took place when the mayor made her announcement regarding the Johns, and I'm still remembering what she said, and I hope you all remember what she said. But what we did is we called together a meeting of the law enforcement community, and the members of that community, if they're here today, I'd like for them to stand. The Fulton County Solicitor's Office, the City of Atlanta Solicitor's Office, I see Raines Carter here today, the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, the Atlanta Police Department, and the Fulton County Police Department. Now, a couple of the things that we decided to do, and I don't want to mention all of the things, but we heard conversation about the internet, because the internet has brought about great changes in law enforcement. And one of the things that happens is the use of the credit card to obtain sexual services. So one of the things that we're doing, there's a U.S. Senate banking committee called the Financial Coalition Against Child Pornography. What we're doing is we're preparing a presentation, because what we're going to ask the committee to do is to see whether or not we can come up with a way to prevent the use of credit cards to obtain sex. We don't think that these Johns should be able to use credit cards to exploit children. And so we're going to be working with the Senate committee to see whether or not we can change that. We're also going to revert back to something that happened 5 or 6 years ago, and that is seizing the cars of Johns. What we want to do, if you're a John in Atlanta, if you get arrested, we want you to have to go home and explain to your wife and family why my car has been impounded by the Atlanta Police Department. So what we did is apparently there had been some problem regarding whether or not it was still legal to do this. And we found out that under the state statute, it is legal to do it. I spoke with Chief Pennington and with Chief Dreyer, and what they indicated to me from the Atlanta Police Department that sometime towards the end of September, they are going to implement a policy to return to the days when we were seizing the cars of Johns. And I'm hoping, Raines, that we can really get that to happening in Atlanta. One of the other things that we're doing, we're working together, the law enforcement officials, to assault this internet problem. And it is a horrific problem, because now, rather than standing on the corner, as we've heard today, many of these young girls are at computer terminals, and they are being marketed off by people all over the world. And one of the problems we find out is because of our airport. We have discovered groups of young girls from other cities being brought to Atlanta, taken to hotels, and exploited, all through the use of the internet. And so what we're doing is working together to make sure that that does not happen. One of the last things I'd like to mention, the problem that I talked about earlier, is finding a place. Commissioner B.J. Walker, and I don't know if she's here today or any of her representatives, attended the mayor's announcement regarding Johns. Stephanie and Kathy McCullough and I have been working with her, and what we are planning on doing is announcing, and hopefully we can do it in very short order, a facility with 52 additional beds. And this is going to be located in DeKalb County so that we can have a place. Yes, that's And we're hoping that this facility can provide a place for young girls to attend and receive counseling, receive treatment, and move into what we would consider a normal way of life. And we believe that that can happen because one of the very first young ladies who was involved in this whole exploitation issue, we now know that because of treatment she received, she is now in college and doing well. And what we believe that there are many young people who can do the same thing if we can provide a place. So I am glad, I'm really happy to see you all here because what it says to me, you're interested, and I hope that you can maintain that interest so that we can drive this problem out of our community. Thank you all very much.
We know that there are good men in this community. Certainly Paul is one of our strongest supporters, and many men here. Men Stopping Violence is here today and has been an incredible help to us. And we know that it's going to take consciousness and the goodwill of we have so many wonderful minds and big hearts in this community that to have a goal of ending child prostitution may be very lofty. But I'm feeling very hopeful right now, Mayor, and I feel like you've given us the opportunity to make a huge difference. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Stand up in every possible way you can. Thank you for being here. Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, thank you for coming and standing with us in the State House. And all of you, thank you so much.